regular, established, it was then easy for us, to move on into the other weights, establish the other weights in the process, and obviously move on into the other languages. One of them is Greek, for example. And in the Greek, we had a lot of questions as well. One of which, for example, is this glyph here. Traditionally, you would have that descending, but this is a contemporary typeface. Is there a case for it to be sitting on baseline? Or this glyph, the phi. Traditionally, this is a very traditional form. It's a very calligraphic form to have it open. But is this really appropriate in this context of clean shapes and of contemporary design? And the question is, should you not, make it a closed shape? So we were consulting with our Greek person, and she basically said, well, actually, there is no hard and fast rules, and reading habits in Greece are changing, so you can use more contemporary forms. And then this is what we ended up with. If you look at the Greek down here, we did have this glyph on baseline and the phi as a closed shape, a very modern shape, a very clean shape. And this is the full Latin, Greek, and Cyrillic character set we have. It's about 1,350 characters, thereabouts. Everything up to here, that's all Latin. As I say, you get some African stuff here. Then you have the full Cyrillic extended here, and then obviously the Greek polytonic. Everything down here is polytonic range. That gives you about 3 billion people. We also, pretty much as one of the first fonts, included the new rupee symbol, which was only released last summer. And we created another little symbol. The logo for Ubuntu is in the font as well, accessible via keystroke. Right. Italics, yes, italics. Part of the design process, obviously, when you do the font family, is planning how many weights you're going to have, how are these weights set to one another, so they create a nice contrast and a nice kind of texture and gradation, but also the italics. What are your italics going to be like? And there's basically two styles of italics. You have on one hand, like in Verdana, for example, the slanted, and you have the true italics. Slanted, as it says, you put it at an angle, and if you can be bothered, you're going to redraw some of the shapes so they don't look as distorted. True italics, most forms, or many forms, actually change completely in the true italic. Particularly the A, the F, you will find goes descending, the A becomes a single story. In the non-Latins, in the Greeks and the Cyrillics, the changes of the letter forms are even more dramatic, when it becomes a proper cursive, like this, and these two glyphs, in a sense, have absolutely no relation to one another, or these two. And this was a question for the Ubuntu fonts as well, And us as type designers and the Ubuntu design team, we argue this should be a properly designed, high-quality type family, and therefore the italics should be true italics. The client, the big man, the money man, he says, and he's an engineer, so for him it has to be measured, everything has to have a reason, a mathematical reason. He can't think emotionally. For him, it was, well, no, this A has absolutely no correlation to this A, so therefore it should be slanted. This A should look like this A. We said, no, this is not how it historically has come about. Historically, italics were always treated differently from the uprights. I mean, if you go as far back as Aldus Manutius, 1419, they were always designed as separate entities because they were looked at as different scripts. It's only more recently that font families were conceptualized with italics and Romans uprights as one. I mean, if I say recently, we're looking 300 years back, thereabouts. But traditionally, they've always been separate entities. So anyway, we had to kind of convince him, and it was only once he saw the Cyrillics, and he's a Cyrillic reader as well, once he saw the Cyrillics, he saw the point of having a cursive style of italics, with the forms changing. For him, this was the convincing argument, not this. which is weird, really, because this is exactly the same. But because he was familiar with the Cyrillic and felt that these shapes are much more harmonious within an italic context, he could be persuaded to go for an italic, or for proper italic, throughout the whole the script system. Right. In the meantime, the light and the mediums have been designed, they're completed. We're still working on the monospace. The monotype, the monobold italic hasn't started yet, but we're coming to that. And the regular condense we're working on at the moment as well. So this is still all to be done in the 3 scripts, but you can see now sort of like the overview of the font family. You could ask yourself why a monospace. Obviously, Ubuntu is a very much of a techie community, and therefore they want to use terminals, and therefore they need a monospace for programming.
So do Windows and Macintosh have their own font?
Well, Windows has its own system fonts, yes, and the Mac as well, I believe.
Did they, when they were launching an operating system, did they think we need to commission a font?
It's not so much commissioning. Well, Windows, what they did actually when Windows launched Windows 3.1, Microsoft, they did commission Monotype to design Arial. And actually, it's quite a nice little story, because Arial is not the copy of Helvetica. Arial was designed for a specific purpose. In '93, well, it goes earlier a little bit, about 1991, Microsoft was planning to launch Windows 3.1 as a competitor to the Apple graphical user interface. Before that, Microsoft or Windows didn't exist. Microsoft was all DOS operated, command line Windows. And they went to Linotype and said, we would like to purchase the rights to Helvetica, to stick it on every system, use it in perpetuity. Helvetica didn't sell the rights. They said you can license. One of the things you have to understand is Microsoft does not license, Microsoft buys. For simple reasons, if they don't like it, they can kill it, for that simple reason. So Microsoft went away, they went to see Monotype and said, we want a typeface that looks and feels similar to Helvetica and sits exactly on the same metrics, on the same widths, vertical as well as horizontal, as Helvetica. So Monotype went away and designed the font, and what then would happen is that in Windows 3.1 you would start setting your document in Arial, print it, and you get Helvetica coming out of the printer without any document reflow, because it sits exactly on the, or sat on the same metrics. Now today that has changed. Helvetica has moved on. Apple's doesn't use that original version anymore. They use a more up-to-date version. I think Neue Helvetica, if I'm not mistaken, and so on. So that point has become moot in the meantime. But yes, that was an instance where Windows commissioned the font. Apple commissioned the font as well in the early days. Apple's Garamond. It's an ITC version of Garamond, but slightly condensed. So they had some stuff done, and both Microsoft and Apple have in the meantime commissioned typefaces from designers. Microsoft, the latest one with the Vista fonts, Consolas and whatever else is there. That was the latest suite to be done. So yeah, sometimes they go ahead. Apple doesn't do so much anymore. They're not. Let's face it, Apple are not a computer company anymore. They're a lifestyle company. So there's a big shift, so therefore fonts and has become far less of an issue, far less importance. Yeah. Anyway, but for them, for Ubuntu, it was important to have their own font suite to support the whole branding and everything. And these fonts are, by the way, open source. You can download them. The basic 4 are available from fonts.ubuntu.com.
So that's the idea, is that
exactly,
using it.
Exactly, and it's very much a community. It's very much the idea is bring it out into the community for people to have good quality stuff. Yeah, we're currently designing the Hebrew and the Arabic, and just a quick one on the Hebrew. Big question is this. By the way, this is the final Hebrew. When we first started drawing it, the Hebrew, the question is, how do you set the Hebrew next to the Latin? What height should the Hebrew characters be? So that they sit comfortably against the Latin, but also sit comfortably within itself when you just set Hebrew text. But you always, whatever language you do, or whatever script system you do, you always have to consider the Latin. You quite often find, even in Japanese or anything, you find like a Latin name put in because they can't transliterate it, so they actually set it in Latin. So Latin always has to be a consideration when you design a non-Latin script. So we did a whole series of tests in regards to height. And initially we felt it should be closer to the cap height. But then upon further consideration, we felt, no, actually we need to bring it down to sit where it is now, somewhere sort of like, 1/3 up from X height. And this actually gives us a really nice texture now when you sit the two side by side. They feel similar height, they feel comfortable to one another, to give you the same grey tone on the page, as well as on the screen. And throughout the design process, of course, we worked with the Hebrew consultant. There was a lot of kind of like design work to be done, detailed work to be done on how to shape characters exactly, kind of like figuring out the tension of curves and so on to make it a fluid Hebrew. The Arabic was a little bit more tricky. I mean, Hebrew, despite being a Semitic language or Semitic script system going from right to left, is very strongly alphabetic. It's a handful of characters, something like 22 characters or something, in a sense very easy to do. Arabic is far more complex. For one, you have a far richer calligraphic tradition in Arabic than you have in Hebrew. And the question for us is, what kind of style should the Arabic be going to take? On one hand, we have to make sure it is absolutely functional and usable within a UI environment. So therefore, it needs to be fairly horizontal. We also have to be careful that the characters are not too tall and too deep, because I only have a limited amount of vertical space, so I need to keep that constraint as well. At the same time, we want to make sure that when the Arabic is set in body copy by someone, that it feels fluid, fluid and has emotion to it. And so we ended up, we did all these kind of like various trials, and we ended up with a design which is primarily Kufic. So it has a reasonably strong verticality and horizontality, but because of the curvatures and some of the individual characters, there's a fluidity to them, which comes from the Nastaliq influences calligraphic styles. Again, like the Latin, it runs slightly narrow, which poses a problem in some areas where you have the dots. Here you can see the 3 dots is not such a legibility issue, because you read 3 dots, so those two being close together doesn't matter so much. But where you have a situation with 2 dots, that could be misinterpreted over the characters. So we decided to actually put those on a diagonal, the 2 dots. Now I know this is going to come and bite us in the arse, because it's so unusual. We're doing it anyway. And I'm not going to change it. I'm going to insist on this. It's going to happen. It works. It doesn't create legibility issues, not at all. Some Arabic speakers have, it's been going out in beta testing. Some people have said, it's a bit unusual. I'm not quite sure. Others have felt, it's actually quite all right. No problem with that at all. And this is the Arabic as it stands now. And I think it looks pretty good. And if you compare the Latin with the Arabic, kind of like if you sit back there and you squeeze your eyes, you can't really see a tonal difference. And in my opinion, this is when you actually have achieved a good type design between 2 completely different script systems, when you actually can't see a textural change. And this is one of the most important bits, which a lot of fonts don't get right, I think. But also you pick up, certain design elements like the ascenders in the Arabic, being shared at a slight angle like the ascenders in the Latin, picking up on some of those curves, like we picked up in the curves here, etc. Some like small design elements which carry across through to the various script systems. Hinting. Now hinting is important Pity I can't show you the live process of it, but I can explain it. This is for type on screen. Unfortunately, at the moment, the entire digital world is a complete Wild West. There is no standards. Everyone's doing their own thing, which means that type, whatever you do to the font, type will in most environments be not satisfactory. With hinting, I can go some way toward it. Now, hinting is basically me, once the font is designed, placing extra instructions into the font that will tell the rasterizer, basically a piece of software that converts my font outlines to pixels, how to place the pixels on the screen. Yeah. But for that to happen, the rasterizer needs to respect my instructions. The Windows rasterizer does it, and the FreeType rasterizer does it as well. The Apple rasterizer, Apple in their glorious wisdom, have decided to get rid of this altogether, of this feature, which is why now on a Mac, when you look at type 9 point, everything is grayscaled. It just looks washed out, completely washed out. And at 8 point, the type starts becoming legible. I mean, admittedly, the Apple rasterizer is not too bad. It gives you still a decent amount of clarity, but I believe it is detrimental to legibility, a kind of washed out and grey type. Microsoft studies in the past have shown that if the type is 1 pixel in stem width, you should present it in as high contrast as possible, ideally black and white. That gives you the best legibility, despite it looking pixelated. It still gives you the best legibility. So anyway, this is a post-design process. I have to do this process for every single character individually. On a Latin character set, this takes about 5 working days to get it to a very good standard. And now with this, the hinting in place, this will work best in a Windows environment, Microsoft Office environment, because those environments completely respect the instructions I put in. The same font, you put this same font onto a Mac, you will not have any of these features available on a Mac at all. You put it into FreeType, which is the open source stuff. There in FreeType, you have user control. The user can either have hinted fonts or unhinted fonts or auto-hinted fonts, whatever they want. So very little control. But even within one environment, one rasterizer, you get application-dependent displays as well. This is the same font, sitting on the Ubuntu system, using the FreeType rasterizer in both instances, fully hinted, full hinting turned on. This is coming out of Firefox, this is coming out of OpenOffice. It's 2 different things. How on earth can I control that when the application developers don't stick to the rules, don't stick to the specifications which they should adhere to? Ignorance, laziness, I don't know. But in my opinion, pretty wrong, I think. But it is a problem for you guys, once you start doing digital media, because you can't really present good type, despite web fonts and everything. Web fonts is another thing as well. By the way, this is some geezer, he's cracked his Samsung Android system and put Ubuntu fonts on his system. They look pretty nice, I think. But anyway, web fonts is a big issue at the moment, because you have all these hundreds and thousands of fonts now available, through various means of embedding, but the vast majority of the fonts haven't been prepared to look good on the screen. And again, you may look it on your fancy laptop on the Mac, where everything is grayscaled and everything looks reasonably well. You stick the same website on Windows XP, Windows Vista, or go even further back, Windows 2000, which users still have, or even further back, Windows NT4 from 1995, which is still available in corporate environments. This is a pure black and white area. Those fonts will look shit because they're not being prepared. So whenever you do something, a website, and you start deciding to embed fonts, make sure that there is a minimum preparation of the fonts, that is actually suitable for screens in different environments. Absolutely. You cannot rely on what you see on your own machine. You have to test it through about at least 10 different environments to make sure those look good. So web embedding, whilst it is possible now, I think is still, far, very, very far, from an ideal environment, from an ideal position. And the reason why the system fonts are so good and look always good is because they have been fully hinted. People spent months on them. Right, yeah, Ubuntu. So our contractual bit, going to end probably in May, thereabouts. And we're sort of like trying to work with Ubuntu. Obviously, this is a community project. This is an open source project. And the ambition of the Ubuntu font suite is that eventually it will contain every single character that is used on this planet. And we're not only talking languages, we're also talking scientific characters, mathematical characters. You're looking at a character set of about 130,000 glyphs. So that's the ambition. If it will ever happen, I don't know, because it is going to go to the community and will pay commitment, but this is a 10-year project at least. I'm just thinking of Chinese alone. So I hope they pick it up, or I hope I can convince the money man, to spend another shed load of cash on me, so we can carry on with this, because it is a nice project to do. Even though sometimes dealing with the open source community has been a bit of a pain in the arse, but pain in the arse. German double S, looks like better, simple. German double S. I'm Swiss, I don't use it. Swiss have never used it. We got rid of it in the 50s. There is no reason to use the German double S. The Germans hold on to it. Maybe it's something about national identity. Fair enough, I can live with that.
So is that thing that looks like a big B?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Now, the shape of the character, it's a ligature coming out of the long S and the short S. Some people argue it comes out of the long S and the Z, but these are minor academic point. I think it's long S, short S, and that's it. And you can even see that in English and French setting as well. If you go back to the 16th, 17th century, you can still see them. But these languages got rid of it because it's superfluous. Anyway, the Germans felt it was time to introduce a cap version to that as well, about 4 years ago. And they got their kind of orthographic committee together, and they all said, yes, we have to have a cap version of this superfluous character. And then they got the Unicode consortium. Unicode is basically a standard of giving a code point for every single glyph for every language so that you can access it on your keyboard. Got the Unicode consortium to assign a code point to that character. Now we have to design this bloody character, which actually should get rid of it. I refuse, I will not do it, because there is no need for a cap version of it, because it's a lowercase character. And if you go into cap, you make 2 S's, simple, But the Germans, in their stubbornness, in their way of doing things, they're like Rottweilers once they have an idea. They can't be convinced otherwise, So I will not do it. I refuse. I'm not doing it. Anyway, but I say this Ubuntu project. This is a huge project, and hopefully people will pick it up and help. I mean, we'll obviously be on hand to support people. Yes, Ubuntu is not the only thing. Just a quick overview of some of the projects we did. A small project we did for a civic place in Hong Kong, big new shopping centre and everything, was designed by Thomas Heatherwick. And the whole idea, the whole architectural idea, is that it's all fluid curves and stuff. And the type sort of like resembles that, you have like these ligatures and it's all fluid curves and got like little open spaces and all that. So typography and architecture sort of like meld together and resemble one another. Yes, typeface actually we did. This is a money question as well. Typeface we did nearly about 10 years ago. The Sparkasse is a German bank, it's a building society, and has about 17,000 branches across Germany. And these 17,000 branches are organized into 526 institutions. Each of one is an independent business with independent decision-making powers as well. So they can obviously provide tailor-made services and products to the area they live. Because obviously, if you're in Hamburg and you're a fisherman, you have different needs as opposed to the guy who's in Bavaria and he's a cow farmer. So they can tailor-made products. But it went so bad that they all started doing their own kind of like identity and branding stuff. And it got to a point where if you went from Bavaria to Hamburg, you didn't know whether with your card you could actually get money out of the machine in the Sparkasse in Hamburg. So they had a clear identity crisis. And it was detrimental to their business. They were losing business because of that. So they decided, okay, everything has to be under one umbrella, one design. And together with Interbrand, we created like this visual language, and it's primarily based on the typography. Altogether about 17 different font styles, although only about 6 of which are really used in a wider environment for internal.